From the heart of the nation's capital, this week, with ABC's senior White House correspondent Jake Tapper, live from the Newseum on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Good morning. When the president takes a look at the world, he's confronted with threats literally all over the map. In Afghanistan, U.S. and international forces struggle to make headway against the Taliban. Iran moves ahead with a nuclear program in defiance of international condemnation. North Korea becomes even more unpredictable as it prepares for a new supreme leader. New terror threats from Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia. No one knows these threats better than the president's director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Leon Panetta. He's been in the job for 16 months, and he's here with me this morning, his first network news interview. Mr. Panetta, welcome.
Nice to be with you, Jay.
Now, this was a momentous week with President Obama relieving General McChrystal of his command. When this was all going down, you were with General Petraeus at a joint CIA-CENTCOM conference, and I want to ask you about the war in Afghanistan, because this has been the deadliest month for NATO forces in Afghanistan, the second deadliest for U.S. troops, with 52 at least killed this month. Are we winning in Afghanistan, and is the Taliban stronger or weaker than when you started on the job?
I think the president said it best of all, that this is a very tough fight that we're engaged in. There are some serious problems here. We're dealing with a tribal society. We're dealing with a country that has problems with governance, problems with corruption, problems with narcotics trafficking, problems with a Taliban insurgency. And yet, the fundamental purpose, the mission that the president's laid out is that we have to go after al-Qaeda. We've got to disrupt and dismantle al-Qaeda and their militant allies so they never attack this country again. Are we making progress? We are making progress. It's harder, it's slower than I think anyone anticipated. But at the same time, we are seeing increasing violence, particularly in Kandahar and in Helmand provinces. Is the strategy the right strategy? We think so, because we're looking at about 100,000 troops being added by the end of August. If you add 50,000 from NATO, we got 150,000. That's a pretty significant force combined with the Afghans. But I think the fundamental key, the key to success or failure, is whether the Afghans accept responsibility, are able to deploy an effective army and police force to maintain stability. If they can do that, then I think we're going to be able to achieve the kind of progress and the kind of stability that the president's after.
Have you seen any evidence that they're able to do that?
I think so. I think what we're seeing, even in a place like Marcia, where there's been a lot of attention, the fact is that if you look at Marcia on the ground, our agriculture, commerce is moving back to some degree of normality. The violence is down from a year ago. There is some progress there. We're seeing some progress in the fact that there's less deterioration as far as the ability of the Taliban to maintain control. So we are seeing elements of progress, but this is going to be tough. This is not going to be easy, and it is going to demand not only the United States military trying to take on a difficult Taliban insurgency, but it is going to take the Afghan army and police to be able to accept the responsibility that we pass on to them. That's going to be the key.
It seems as though the Taliban is stronger now than when President Obama took office. Is that fair to say?
I think that the Taliban obviously is engaged in greater violence right now. They're doing more on IEDs. They're going after our troops. There's no question about that. In some ways they're stronger, but in some ways they're weaker as well. I think the fact that we are disrupting al-Qaeda's operations in the tribal areas of the Pakistan. I think the fact that we are targeting Taliban leadership. You saw what happened yesterday with one of the leaders who was dressed as a woman being taken down. We are engaged in operations with the military that is going after Taliban leadership. I think all of that has weakened them at the same time. So in some areas, with regards to some of the directed violence, they seem to be stronger, but the fact is we're undermining their leadership, and that I think is moving in the right direction.
How many al-Qaeda do you think are in Afghanistan?
I think the estimate on the number of al-Qaeda is actually relatively small. I think at most we're looking at maybe 50 to 100, maybe less. It's in that vicinity. There's no question that the main location of al-Qaeda is in tribal areas of Pakistan.
Largely lost in the trash talking in the Rolling Stone magazine story were some concerns about the war. The chief of operations for General McChrystal told the magazine that the end game in Afghanistan is, quote, not going to look like a win, smell like a win, or taste like a win. This is going to end in an argument. What does winning in Afghanistan look like?
Winning in Afghanistan is having a country that is stable enough to ensure that there is no safe haven for al-Qaeda or for a militant Taliban that welcomes al-Qaeda. That's really the measure of success for the United States. Our purpose, our whole mission there, is to make sure that al-Qaeda never finds another safe haven from which to attack this country. That's the fundamental goal of why the United States is there. And the measure of success for us is, do you have an Afghanistan that is stable enough to make sure that never happens?
What's the latest thinking on where Osama bin Laden is, what kind of health he's in, and how much control or contact he has with al-Qaeda?
He is, as is obvious, in very deep hiding. He's in an area of the tribal areas in Pakistan that is very difficult. The terrain is probably the most difficult in the world.
Can you be more specific? Is it Waziristan or?
All I can tell you is it's in the tribal areas. Is all we know, that he's located in that vicinity. The terrain is very difficult. He's obviously has tremendous security around him. But having said that, the more we continue to disrupt al-Qaeda's operations, and we are engaged in the most aggressive operations in the history of the CIA in that part of the world. And the result is that we are disrupting their leadership. We've taken down more than half of their Taliban leadership, of their al-Qaeda leadership. We just took down number 3 in their leadership a few weeks ago. We continue to disrupt them. We continue to impact on their command and control. We continue to impact on their ability to plan attacks in this country. If we keep that pressure on, we think ultimately we can flush out bin Laden and Zawahiri and get after them.
When's the last time we had good intelligence on bin Laden's location?
It's been a while. I think it almost goes back, to the early 2000s. In terms of actually when he was moving from Afghanistan to Pakistan, that we had the last precise information about where he might be located. Since then, it's been very difficult to get any intelligence on his exact location. We're
in a new phase now of the war in which the threat can come from within the so-called homegrown terrorist or the lone wolf terrorist. I'm talking about Faisal Shahzad, the would-be Times Square bomber, Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, the failed Christmas Day bomber, Lieutenant Nidal Hassan, the Fort Hood shooter. What do these incidents and the apparent increased occurrences of these type of attacks say about the nature of the threat we face?
I think what's happened is the more we put pressure on the al-Qaeda leadership in the tribal areas in Pakistan, and I would say that as a result of our operations, that the Taliban leadership is probably at its weakest point since 9/11 and their escape from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Having said that, they clearly are continuing to plan, continuing to try to attack this country, and they're using other ways to do it.
Al-Qaeda you're talking about,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
They're continuing to do that, and they're using other ways to do it, which are in some ways more difficult to try to track. One is the individual who has no record of terrorism. That was true for the Detroit bomber in some ways. It was true for others. If they're using somebody who doesn't have a record in terrorism, it's tougher to track them. If they're using people who are already here, who are in hiding, and suddenly decide to come out and do an attack, that's another potential threat that they're engaged in. The third is the individual who decides to self-radicalize. Hassan did that in the Fort Hood shootings. Those are the kinds of threats that we see, and we're getting intelligence that shows that that's the kind of stream of threats that we face. Much more difficult to track. At the same time, I think we're doing a good job of moving against those threats. We've stopped some attacks. We continue to work the intelligence in all of these areas. But that area, those kinds of threats, represent, I think, the most serious threat to the United States right now.
All 3 of those individuals were tied in some way to an American cleric who's now supposedly in Yemen, Anwar al-Awlaki. He is said to be on an assassination list by President Obama. Is that true? And does being an American afford him any protection that any other terrorist might not enjoy?
Al-Awlaki is a terrorist who's declared war on the United States. Everything he's doing now is to try to encourage others to attack this country. There's a whole stream of intelligence that goes back to Al-Awlaki and his continuous urging of others to attack this country in some way. You can track Al-Awlaki to the Detroit bomber. We can track him to other attacks in this country that have been urged by Al-Awlaki or that have been influenced by Al-Awlaki. Al-Awlaki is a terrorist. And yes, he's a U.S. citizen, but he is first and foremost a terrorist, and we're going to treat him like a terrorist. We don't have an assassination list, but I can tell you this, we have a terrorist list, and he's on it.
The New York Times reported this week that Pakistani officials say they can deliver the network of Sirajuddin Haqqani, an ally of al-Qaeda who runs a major part of the insurgency in Afghanistan, into a power-sharing arrangement. In addition, Afghan officials say the Pakistanis are pushing various other proxies, with Pakistani General Kayani personally offering to broker a deal with the Taliban leadership. Do you believe Pakistan will be able to push the Haqqani network into peace negotiations?
You know, I read all the same stories. We get intelligence along those lines. But the bottom line is that we really have not seen any firm intelligence that there's a real interest among the Taliban, the militant allies of Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda itself, the Haqqanis, TTP, the other militant groups. We have seen no evidence that they are truly interested in reconciliation, where they would surrender their arms, where they would denounce Al-Qaeda, where they would really try to become part of that society. We've seen no evidence of that. And very frankly, my view is that with regards to reconciliation, unless they're convinced the United States is going to win and that they're going to be defeated, I think it's very difficult to proceed with a reconciliation that's going to be meaningful.
I know you can't discuss certain classified operations or even acknowledge them, but even since you've been here today, we've heard about another drone strike in Pakistan, and there's been much criticism of the Predator drone program of the CIA. United Nations official Phil Alston earlier this month said, quote, "In a situation in which there is no disclosure of who has been killed, for what reason, and whether innocent civilians have died, the legal principle of international accountability is by definition comprehensively violated." Will you give us your personal assurance that everything the CIA is doing in Pakistan is compliant with U.S. and international law?
There's no question that we are abiding by international law and the law of war. Look, the United States of America on 9/11 was attacked by Al-Qaeda. They killed 3,000 innocent men and women in this country. We have a duty, we have a responsibility to defend this country so that Al-Qaeda never conducts that kind of attack again. Does that make some of the Al-Qaeda and their supporters uncomfortable? Does it make them angry? Yeah, it probably does. But that means that we're doing our job. We have a responsibility to defend this country, and that's what we're doing. And anyone who suggests that somehow, we're employing other tactics here that somehow violate international law are dead wrong. What we're doing is defending this country. That's what our operations are all about.
I'd like to move on to Iran just because that consumes a lot of your time as director of the CIA. Do you think these latest sanctions will dissuade the Iranians from trying to enrich uranium?
I think the sanctions will have some impact. The fact that we had Russia and China agree to that there's at least strong international opinion that Iran is on the wrong track, that's important. Those sanctions will have some impact. The sanctions that were passed by the Congress this last week will have some additional impact. It could help weaken the regime. It could create some serious economic problems. Will it deter them from their ambitions with regards to nuclear capability? Probably not.
The 2007 National Intelligence Estimate said all of Iran's work on nuclear weapons ended in 2003. You don't still believe that, do you?
I think they continue to develop their know-how. They continue to develop their nuclear capability.
Including weaponization?
I think they continue to work on designs in that area. There is a continuing debate right now as to whether or not they ought to proceed with a bomb. but they clearly are developing their nuclear capability, and that raises concerns. It raises concerns about just exactly what are their intentions and where do they intend to go. I mean, we think they have enough low-enriched uranium right now for 2 weapons. They do have to enrich it fully in order to get there. And we would estimate that if they made that decision, it probably would take a year to get there, probably another year to develop the kind of weapon delivery system in order to make that viable. But having said that, the President and the international community has said to Iran, you've got to wake up. You've got to join the family of nations. You've got to abide by international law. That's in the best interests of Iran. It's in the best interests of the Iranian people.
The administration has continually said that Iran has run into technical troubles in their nuclear program. Is that because the Iranians are bad at what they do, or because the U.S. and other countries are helping them be bad at what they do by sabotaging, in some instances, their program?
Well, I can't speak to, obviously, intelligence operations, and I won't. It's enough to say that clearly they have had problems. There are problems with regards to their ability to develop enrichment. And I think we continue to urge them to engage in peaceful use of nuclear power. If they did that, they wouldn't have these concerns. They wouldn't have these problems. The international community would be working with them rather than having them work on their own.
How likely do you think it is that Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities within the next 2 years?
I think, Israel obviously is very concerned, as is the entire world, about what's happening in Iran. And they in particular, because they're in that region of the world, have a particular concern about their security. At the same time, I think, on an intelligence basis, we continue to share intelligence as to what exactly is Iran's capacity. I think they feel more strongly that Iran has already made the decision to proceed with a bomb. But at the same time, I think they know that sanctions will have an impact. They know that if we continue to push Iran from a diplomatic point of view, that we can have some impact. And I think they're willing to give us the room to be able to try to change Iran diplomatically and culturally and politically, as opposed to changing them militarily.
There was a big announcement over the weekend. South Korea and the U.S. agreed to delay the transfer of wartime operational control to Seoul for 3 years because of the belligerence of North Korea. Kim Jong-il appears to be setting the stage for succession, including, with many experts believe, that torpedo attack in March on the South Korean warship. They believe that this is all setting the stage for the succession of his son Kim Jong-un. Is that how you read all this and the sinking of the warship?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. I think our intelligence shows that that at the present time, there is a process of succession going on. As a matter of fact, I think
was the warship attack part of that?
I think that that could have been part of it in order to establish credibility for his son. That's what went on when he took power. His son is very young. His son is very untested. His son is loyal to his father and to North Korea. But his son does not have the kind of credibility with the military because nobody really knows what he's going to be like. So I think part of the provocations that are going on, part of the skirmishes that are going on, are in part related to trying to establish credibility for the son. And that makes it a dangerous period. Will it result in military confrontation? I don't think so. For 40 years, we've been going through these kinds of provocations and skirmishes with a rogue regime. In the end, they always back away from the brink, and I think they'll do that now.
The CIA recently entered into a new $100 million contract with Blackwater, now called Z Services for Security in Afghanistan. Blackwater guards allegedly opened fire in a city square in Baghdad in 2007, killing 17 unarmed civilians. And since then, the firm has been fighting off prosecution, civil suits. Earlier this year, a federal grand jury indicted 5 Blackwater officials on 15 counts of conspiracy, weapons, and obstruction of justice charges. Here's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, a Democrat from Illinois, who's a member of the House Intelligence Committee.
I'm just mystified why any branch of the government would decide to hire Blackwater, such a repeat offender. We're talking about murder, a company with a horrible reputation that really jeopardizes our mission in so many different different ways.
What's your response?
Since I've become director, I've asked our agency to review every contract we have had with Blackwater and whatever their new name is. I think it's Z now. And to ensure that, first and foremost, that we have no contract in which they're engaged in any CIA operations. We're doing our own operations. That's important, that we not contract that out to anybody. But at the same time, I have to tell you that in the war zone, we continue to have needs for security. We've got a lot of forward bases. We've got a lot of attacks on some of those bases. We've got to have security. Unfortunately, there are a few companies that provide that kind of security. The State Department relies on them. We rely on them to a certain extent. So we've bid out some of those contracts. They provided a bid that was underbid everyone else by about $26 million. And a panel that we had said that they can do the job, that they have shaped up their act. So there really was not much choice but to accept that contract. But having said that, I will tell you that I continue to be very cautious about any of those contracts, and we're reviewing all of the bids that we have with that company.
This month, Attorney General Eric Holder announced that Assistant United States Attorney John Durham is close to completing a preliminary review of whether or not there's evidence that CIA agents or contractors violated the law when they used brutal methods, some call torture, to interrogate terrorist detainees. You opposed this investigation. Are your officers, your current officers, concerned about their legal jeopardy in the future under a future administration, and what kind of guarantees can you give them?
Well, look, the CIA is an agency that has to collect intelligence, do operations. We have to take risks. And it's important that we take risks and that we know that we have the support of the government and we have the support of the American people in what we're doing. With regards to this investigation, I know the reasons the Attorney General decided to proceed. I didn't agree with him, but he decided to proceed. We're cooperating with him in that investigation. I've had discussions with the Attorney General, and he assures me that, that this investigation will be expedited. And I think in the end, it'll turn out to be okay. What I've told my people is, please focus on the mission we have. Let me worry about Washington and those issues. And I think they have, and I think, frankly, the morale at the CIA is higher than it's ever been.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to ask you, you're now privy to information about some of the ugliest, toughest tactics carried out by intelligence agencies with the purpose of defending our nation. Stuff that probably, as a member of Congress or OMB director or White House chief of staff, you suspected but didn't actually know for a fact. How rough is it? And does any of it ever make it difficult for you to sleep at night or run to do an extra confession?
Well, I mean, I didn't realize that I would be making decisions, as many decisions about life and death as I do now, and I don't take those decisions lightly. Those are difficult decisions, but at the same time, I have to tell you that the most rewarding part of this job. I mean, we had a tragedy in Host where we lost 7 of our officers, and it was tragic. But at the same time, it also provided a great deal of inspiration because the quality of people that work at the CIA are very dedicated and very committed to trying to help save this country and protect this country. They're not Republicans, they're not Democrats, they're just good Americans trying to do their job. And that, I think, is the most rewarding part of being director of the CIA.
But what's the flip side? Sleepless nights?
The flip side is you have to spend an awful lot of time worried about what the hell's going to go on out there. And that keeps me up at night.
This is my last question for you because we only have about a minute left. What terrorist threat are we as a nation not paying enough attention to? Or forget terrorist threat. What threat are we not paying enough attention to?
I think the one I worry about is, again, the proliferation of nuclear weapons and the fact that one of those weapons could fall into the hands of a terrorist. I think that's one concern. And there's a lot of this stuff out there, and you worry about just exactly where it's located and who's getting their hands on it. The other is the whole area of cybersecurity. We are now in a world in which cyber warfare is very real. It could threaten our grid system, it could threaten our financial system, it could paralyze this country. And I think that's an area we have to pay a lot more attention to.
All right, Director Leon Panetta, thank you so much for coming here today. Really appreciate it.